One of the most common alternate histories out there is, what if Germany won World War I? Now, a German victory in World War I doesn't necessarily mean a victory for the Central Powers. Just because Germany wins doesn't mean that the Ottomans, the Austro-Hungarians, and the Bulgarians will also win the war. But this is something that I'll bring up later. Another issue we have is, how did Germany win the Great War? Was the Schlieffen Plan successful? Did Italy stay with the Central Powers? Did the French mutinies of 1917 lead to a French surrender? Did America stay neutral? Did America enter the war later? Did Mexico join the Central Powers? Was Kaiserschlact successful? Did the Ottomans win at the Battle of Sarikamish? Were the Austro-Hungarians a competent fighting force? Or did everyone realize the true military genius of Konrad von Hotzendorf? So we have many different scenarios where Germany could have won World War I. However, each of these scenarios would result in a different outcome. For full transparency, I will not be talking about why the Entente won World War I, why Germany lost World War I, and what the ramifications were in the post-war world. I will also not be talking too much into detail about the effects of this German victory, because this video would then be an hour long. Today's scenario is, what if Kaiserschlacht was successful? Kaiserschlacht, for those who don't know, was the German spring offensive of 1918. There are many different conditions which we can change to result in a German victory. In this scenario, U.S. forces would have to be delayed, or less likely to occur but more necessary for a German win would be pure U.S. neutrality, or the U.S. remains out of the war in 1918 or enters later in 1917, just so the Entente is backed by America, but the U.S. does not have tons of troops in Europe by the start of the German spring offensive. Germany wins the war in 1918 by forcing France to surrender, and their overstretched supply line gamble is successful. Germany would annex territory and impose heavy reparations on the Entente. With the exception of Paul von Lettow-Vorbeck, Germany lost the war in Africa. With this in mind, Germany would still want Middle Africa and would likely negotiate colonies and territories in Africa with the Entente in exchange for some debt relief. In 1918 in the Middle East, the Entente had defeated the Ottoman Empire. As far as Germany is concerned, they don't care. As far as the Sykes-Picot Agreement and the creation of the Mandate of Palestine, it'd be impossible to determine that with a German victory in World War I. Since they lost the war, the British and French would still likely try to have some form of division in the Middle East in order to pay back their war debts to the Germans. Just like in our timeline, we'd likely see Arab rebellions against the French in Syria. Unlike in our timeline, the British might see a benefit in arming the Kingdom of Hejaz against the Kingdom of Saud to control the Arabian Peninsula. Austria-Hungary would still divide up into multiple different states, but it's likely that each country would view itself as a winner of the war. Okay, time to talk Eastern Europe. The Bolsheviks in Russia are either put down by German-backed White Army forces or remain in Russia as Germany gained 1/3 of their Russian territories from the Brest-Litovsk Treaty. It's unlikely but possible that Germany might not care what happens in the rest of Russia as Germany creates client states in the other 1/3 of their newly gained territory. In Eastern Europe, the Germans would also gain influence over Baku and the Caucasus. In Asia, Germany would likely just try to get back their Asian colonies which had been taken away from them in the war. The U.S. defeat leads to new isolationism or mass militarization and modernization within the U.S. It would really depend on how the American public views the Wilson administration's handling of the Great War and how the news spun the end of the war. The British would have been utterly humiliated in Europe, but would have had a victory in the Middle East, and it's really unknown how that would affect the British public. The situation in France would just be too difficult to even try to predict. France could have a civil war between the socialists and the government, or whatever kinds of ideologies rise up in France. One thing is for sure, though, Germany gains a huge win from winning World War I and has relative global hegemony, which would have far-reaching impacts into the modern day. So there's my best brief prediction of what would happen had Germany won World War I in 1918 with their spring offensive. Of course, there are things that I could not predict and some places where I had to speculate. Please be nice in the YouTube comments. Thank you very much for watching.